The decision. A year had passed since Enoch's powerful message had momentarily rippled the peace of the city. On a slight elevation, near the western walls, a beautiful edifice of finest cedar took shape in preparation for Ben and Shania's marriage. Each day Shania and Ira strolled about the shaded property, planning the landscaping, having foraged far afield to find the most rare and exotic plants. For they saw it all in their mind's eye, these two, the sloping expanse of green interspersed with graceful trees, rock walls, and shrubbery, water and fountains and streams piped in from the surrounding hills, and color everywhere. Sometimes, as they worked, Iris spoke soberly to Shania of her diminishing faith, and the pain of loss would be strong within her. But it took only a glimpse of Ben to erase such thought from her mind. He loved her with an exuberant obsession that she could not resist. If he came more and more to enjoy the life of the city, she chose not to notice. When the house was complete, they would wed, and Ona was already planning a week of festivities such as her friends had never seen. She would present her daughter in the richest materials the passing caravans had to offer, and the legend of her beauty would travel afar. Nathan would be proud and forget his foolish longings for his peasant roots. He would see at last that she had planned well for Shania, that she had been a good mother after all. They sat one evening, the four of them, relaxing over what Ben called their Havala meal of simple breads and fruits, when a servant entered to announce a visitor who had not waited to be summoned, but followed close upon the man's heels. Nathan leaped up in astonishment. Adriel, what are you doing here? He encircled him in a great hug. Shania recognized the man as one of her father's younger brothers, and she had a chilling premonition that he was the bearer of bad tidings. After the emotional reunion and an introduction to Ona, Adriel seated himself at the table but refused the food urged upon him. Before he could speak, Nathan noted his pale and haggard features. You look exhausted, my brother. You need rest. Come. I will arrange for you to bathe and sleep. We can talk later. Shania thought how much alike they looked, the Havala men. Only her father was of slighter build, a more aesthetic man. She loved Ben's strength. He reminded her of the lion they had seen by the lake, with his coiled, sinewy magnetism. Adriel broke into her reverie with words that startled them all into horrified silence. I cannot sleep, Nathan. I come bearing the most terrible of messages. The family, the people of Havala, they are all dead. Our home is destroyed and the valley is lost to us. What are you saying, Adriel? Ben demanded. Have you gone mad? No, Ben, I am quite sane. A tribe from the north, the people of Yadin, has taken over our land and our children and killed the adults. His voice broke and he could not go on. Nathan, seated beside him, placed an arm about his shoulders and wept with him. Shania searched Ben's face, but found it detached, controlled. When he could speak once more, Adriel resumed his story. I had been weeks with the sheep in an upper meadow, several miles from the main camp. Each sixth day, young Dor, son of Elred, brought me food and spent the Sabbath with me. When he did not come one week, I thought only they needed him at the camp. I had enough supplies by supplementing them with wild berries and fruit, but when he did not arrive the following week, I feared some beast had harmed him along the way. I decided I must leave the sheep and search for him, so I drove the flock into a gorge and blocked the entrance with boulders for their safety. Then I set out to look for him. As I rode up the valley, I noted a strange silence in the fields. No hymns of praise rising, no sign our kinsmen working, just an ominous quiet everywhere. I rode up the hillside and made my way cautiously through the trees, being careful to stay out of sight. You know, Nathan, where the river makes a sharp bend and the camp lies just beyond? Well, at that point I saw a sight that struck terror to my heart. For armed guards ruled the circuit of the camp, and hundreds, maybe thousands, were building, Nathan. In our valley, they are creating a city. In Mother's gardens, the beautiful rock garden she had built on the hillside in honor of Yahweh, they are making a grove. A great golden image stood in the middle of Mother's creations, and the poppies sprang crimson among the rocks like tears of blood at the sacrilege. Adriel bowed his head sobbing, and Shania felt tears on her own cheeks. It was Ona who spoke at last. "This is a terrible tale, Adriel. Can you go on?" Shania reached out to take Ben's hand as her uncle continued, and Nathan sat pale as death. There were young children, our children, working as slaves in the field close to home, but not a grown Havala man or woman, only a smoking heap where their bodies had been burned far down the valley. "The servants? They did not spare the servants?" Ben asked. Adriel laughed bitterly. The invaders well knew the servants would rise up against them when the opportunity arose. They were followers of the true God, every one, and a loved segment of our father's family, treated as sons and daughters. However much the enemy may have wanted their services, they knew better than to spare them. Shania tried to imagine the valley barefoot of Sep and his altar, his holy altar, of Abigail, bronze and smiling in the joy of her sacred hope. Well, they would sleep with Adam until the promised one made all things right. She wondered how. Abigail and Adam had spoken of the coming one and his death. But what then? What of those who returned to the dust? Would they live again? There was nothing I could do. Adriel forced himself to finish the story. Not even for the children. Shania felt his agony deep in her soul. "I decided to come and tell you and Ben, lest you make a trip for Clay, Nathan, and stumble upon the nightmare." Shania heard her mother suck in her breath sharply. "What will you do without Clay, Nathan?" Her husband stared at her in angry astonishment. "At a time like this, you think of Clay, Ona? My parents are dead. My brothers are dead. My people are gone, and you think of Clay." She faced him coolly. "It is our livelihood, Nathan, and there is nothing we can do for the dead. I can expect he can acquire the Clay for a price. He is not, after all, a follower of God, and they will count him as one of their own." As his brother's words burned into him, Nathan's eyes registered a pain from which Shania had to turn away from. Late that night, when all had retired to their sleeping quarters, Shania slipped out to her garden. It had been a long time since she had gone there, her interest having shifted to the landscaping of her new home. The garden looked just as it had before, and she knew that Ira's loving hands had kept it that way. Suddenly, there in the darkness, she cried terrible, racking sobs for the grandmother she would never see again, for the valley that had been her spiritual home. Was her father, too, weeping? Or must he stifle his mourning before the woman who would never understand? Must the tears linger forever unshed in his heart? All at once she realized that she had saved her own tears for this place. She had not gone to the comfort of Ben's arms, sensing he too would not understand. Havala Valley had been his childhood home far more than hers. The smoke of his parents' dying had drifted over the shining river of his boyhood. Yet this night he had left the room without a word or a tear, as though they irritated the break in the routine. Asking no question about his younger brothers and sisters, he had rejected his roots in a way never possible even for Nathan. His reaction left her troubled. Did she really know the man soon to become her husband? She had loved his smile, his body, his joy, his adoration of her, and she had been satisfied with that. What lay beneath the exterior? Who would guard the faith of Sep and Abigail? Only Adriel survived, and where would he find another godly wife? As she thought of him now lying beneath the soft wool coverlets of her mother's guest quarters, she tried to imagine his sorrow as he mourned his wife and his 13-year-old daughter. Impulsively, she decided to go to him. Adriel, my kinsman, she whispered to his open window. It is Shania. May I come in? He bade her to enter, and she saw him in the dim light of his clay lamp, sitting up in bed, his eyes red, his face swollen. She went to him and sat beside him, taking his large calloused hand in hers. I have come to grieve with you, Adriel, to carry a little of your sorrow. I love them too, especially my grandmother. They sat quietly together, weeping in the gentle darkness, and later she went her way without a word. Nathan did not go to his workshop for days, saying he had no heart for it. Both he and Adriel picked at their food and grew thin. Ona scolded and cajoled to no avail. Really, Father, you two must eat, Shania urged one sunny morning as she piled them with melons and bowls of steaming barley glistening with honey. Cutting the cool fruit listlessly, her father smiled sadly. It's odd. I went home only twice a year. I saw them so little. Yet thinking of Havala without my mother there, without her smile and her greeting, leaves me ill. I cannot think of food. It turns my stomach. And Adriel's grief is worse. The blood of his wife and child lay fresh upon that loved soil. Can you really expect us to eat? Ben, seated on his right, ate with relish. Nothing will bring back Havala or our family. Grandfather Sepp feared this invasion. He spoke often to us of its possibility, and he told us not to fight. He wanted no bloodshed. He said the land and our lives were not important, only obedience to God. It was one reason I left. I had no desire to find myself trapped in that valley, the victim of any foe who came along. Even if we had fought, Ben, we would have been no match for their numbers and their weaponry. And Father was right. Warfare is the evil one, of the evil one. It is better to die at peace with God than to slash and kill for a few more years of life. It's easy for you to say, the young man replied testily. You are alive and well. Do you think those who lived and died in that smoking heap would agree? Adriel looked at his cocky young nephew squarely in the eye. I wish to God I had died with them, for my life without them is bitter. But you know nothing of such sorrow. The Lord forgive you for your foolish words and your disloyalty to him and your family. Rising from his chair abruptly, controlling his anger, Ben left for his place of anger. Please excuse him, Adriel, Shania urged gently. He seems edgy lately. Not himself. He resents me here, the refugee said, not unkindly. I remind him of all he hoped to leave behind. My grief annoys him. It is time for me to go, Nathan. I have been meaning to discuss my plans with you, and now is a good time as any. You must return to your clay, and I must take up my life once more. Our mother would have little patience with our indolence and our tears. Shania laughed in relief at his words. You are right, Adriel. She would say, I am ashamed of you too. Put your trust in the promised one, and live responsibly upon the earth. Stop mourning for us. We sleep in faith. You sound just like her, child. Nathan glanced at his daughter fondly. So what are your plans, brother? I wish you would stay safely with us. I cannot, though I am loath to leave you. But, forgive me, I cannot stay in this house where idols stare at me from every corner and no one worships God. Nathan, you have been kind, and Ona has been gracious and understanding. You have given me time to mourn. I have thought much about the future. The prophet Enoch, surely you have heard of him, predicts a judgment to come upon the earth that will destroy all mankind, except those committed to him. I dare not live in the city, Nathan. I see what has happened to you and Ben. So subtly evil invades the life, and I am no less acceptable than you, my brother. I must go where God is worshipped, and where all nature speaks of him daily in the sunsets and the mountains and the lakes. Enoch taught Father how to find his valley, and Father in turn taught each of us his sons. Just for a time like this. Next, first day, I shall set out to find the place. for it is one of the few spots left where God's people worship him in safety and peace. It is a far journey, but I am eager to be on my way. You cannot go alone, Adriel. Nathan's voice was tight with concern. He will not have to, Father, Shania said quietly. I will accompany him, and Ira too wishes to go. He has longed to since Enoch spoke here in the city, but he was too reluctant to ask for his release. Shania, you do not understand. Adriel will not be returning. He speaks of making his home there. I understand, Father. I understand fully. I too speak of making my home there. But what of Ben, your marriage, your new home, your mother? Shania, we must talk about this. You're acting upon impulse. She heard the fear in his voice and steeled herself against it. Father, I am nearly 30. This is no childish whim. Seeing her mother standing in the doorway, she wondered how long she had been listening. I have known almost from the start I would have to choose between Ben and God. Ben has hardened his heart against the teaching of his childhood. That is why he cannot mourn his family. When he rode away, he had to destroy within his mind Havala and all it contained. He soon saw that to be popular and successful here, he had to dismiss God as well. He felt that in time I would do the same. Adriel is right. This world is an increasing rebellion against God. One must walk away from sin or be engulfed by it. At first, when Ben fell in love with me, I convinced myself I could have him in God too. Soon, however, I saw his slow disintegration and felt myself slipping downward with him. I no longer cared. I wanted him too much. He was Havala to me, and I loved Havala. When Enoch spoke, it stirred my heart. Since then, it has been harder to still my conscience. But I had not the courage to leave Ben. I truly love him. Her voice trembled, but she went on. Now Havala is gone. I realize it is not the place I longed for, but the love of God I felt there. It was the people and its lives and how it lives on in Adriel and Ira and Enoch and God's followers everywhere, however few, but not in Ben. Nor in us, her mother said bitterly, tears streaming down her cheeks. Half crazed with the thought of losing her, Nathan exploded. Shania, I forbid you to go. Ona quickly slipped to his side, holding his head against her, stroking his hair. Nathan, my darling, remember she is free. Free to choose God or this hunk of silver. She nudged a nearby image with her toe. It was you who took her to Abigail and then to Eden. You have led her to this moment. Do not make it hard for her. And they clung to each other, pale and still. Shania sought Adriel's eyes for strength and found it. He understood her decision and what it cost her. And as she passed him to console her sorrowing parents, he lightly touched her shoulder. That night she asked Ben to walk with her in the gardens, and there, with her heart thumping wildly and fighting for control of her emotions, she told him of her decision to leave with Adriel. Ben remained silent until she finished, and then he seized her roughly by the shoulders. Shania, don't leave me, he said brokenly. There is nothing here in this place for me with you gone. I cannot ever love the superficial women of the city. I've still too much of the valley in me. I'll never love anyone but you. I promise I'll bring no images into the garden or into the house. You can worship your God or no one at all. Just don't leave me. Why don't you come with us to Enoch's Valley? She willed him to say yes. I can't. Long ago I came to hate the worship of God and all its restrictions. Even for you I cannot go. He turned away from Shania and nervously clenched and unclenched his fist. I want power. That's why I like it here. These people respect power. We understand each other. Adam said that's what the evil one wanted. Power. It's a dangerous desire, Ben. Better to leave the power to God. She did not urge him further. His admission had shown her he would only bring dissension to Enoch's Valley. Why did Adriel have to come here? We would soon have been married and moved into our home. You were happy enough before. We would have known the same terrible sorrows my parents suffered. Deep down I knew it all along, but I loved you so much I would not allow myself to think of it. Surely, Ben, you knew it too. He held her in his arms, and as her tears stained his tunic, Shania felt her girlhood and her happiness slipping away. Adriel could never say again that Ben knew nothing of sorrow, for the sounds of his anguish tore harshly into the soft summer night. The moment of departure had arrived, and Shania steadied herself against the waves of terror and sadness that washed over her. What was she doing, heading into the wilderness with Ira and Adriel? Where was she going? Would she ever see the faces of her parents again? Who was this God who had asked such a thing of her? Could he never speak directly to her? Never show his face? Yet deep within something sang sweet and clear, a thin, sure blessing on her journey. She held on to it tenaciously when her father's agonized face ripped into her resolution. Ben had immediately moved into their partially completed home, so she had not seen him since the night in the garden. It startled her now as he appeared in the dim early morning light. Adriel headed toward him, reaching out in a welcoming gesture. Ben, I'm glad you came. I wanted to speak to you. We are sons of Sep, men of Havala. Come with us. You are a proud, restless man, hungry for authority. Do not be angry, he said, noting the other's sudden glowering. I recognize these traits in you because I was once such like you at the same age. Abigail would tell you I was the most headstrong of her sons. She trembled for me, and rightly so. Once we were watching the sheep, Mother and I chafed under these simple pastoral duties. She said to me, Adriel, you are like a young lion stalking the earth, hungry for adventure, seeking something over which to exercise control. But my son, there is no power worth coveting except the power over one's weakness, and only Yahweh can bestow that. I cannot help how I feel, I told her sullenly. But God can change all that, she said. You must pray. I told her I did not even like to pray. She said, Kneel, Adriel, and I can see her yet, holding a black lamb in her arms, all golden against that great blue bowl of sky over Havala. And because I adored her, I knelt. You only have to say 4 words, Adriel, just 4 words. Lord, make me humble. Say them, son. So kneeling there in the grasses of the upper meadow, feeling foolish, I prayed those 4 words. She put her hands on my shoulders and looked at me fiercely. Now, keep on praying them every day. The Lord's work in you will not be easy. For some unexplicable reason, I did continue saying that simple prayer, almost in defiance, to prove it couldn't be done, this character reversal she predicted. But Ben, the ways of God are past understanding. Slowly I felt myself changing. I wasn't so eager to fight, to elbow my way to the forefront, and I began to know the truth of my mother's words, that power over our weakness was all we'd have time for in this world. I began to plead for that power. I didn't mind watching the sheep anymore, for there in that beautiful meadow I learned to talk with God and to experience a happiness that I'd never believed possible. Come with us, Ben. Learn to pray my mother's prayer. Shania thought no one could resist the tender pleading in Adriel's voice. She saw the struggle in Ben's face, and every fiber of her being cried out to him to yield. But in the end he turned, and he disappeared into the darkness without a word. Nathan and Ona, deeply moved by Adriel's words, stood quiet and resigned as Shania embraced them, then mounted Hadish. She glanced back just once more as they slipped out onto the street and saw the home and the garden she had so loved outlined sharply against the first soft pinks of dawn. Her mother raised an arm in farewell, and Shania locked that picture into her mind for all time.